I did my research paper on pursuing happiness through chemical means, and I believe that there are like three main areas where people pursue happiness through chemical means. So those are basic survival, like three areas where people want to be happy basically. Basic survival, pleasure, and then transcendence, enlightenment, or like self-actualization. So it's like sort of based on like Maslow's hierarchy of needs basically. And so the least controversial use of chemicals and drugs in pursuit of happiness is when they're used in to fight like diseases such as like depression and OCD and things of that nature. So people who suffer from like clinical depression use substances like lithium and Prozac to just sort of balance out the chemicals in their brain and be able to function normally and fight their depression. And that's the least controversial, but it still has people who oppose it for certain reasons, for two main reasons actually. And the first of those reasons is that it takes a lot less work than other methods such as cognitive therapy, which requires you to go to meetings regularly and things of that nature. So our society sort of has this idea of no pain, no gain, which is that you can't just achieve anything just through taking the substance, right? So a lot of people are opposed to it for that reason. They see that there's something wrong with it. And then also because in addition to treating the symptoms, it also can alter personality, so it can make the person sort of different. Even if it's in a positive way, even if it improves their personality, it makes them less anxious or more confident, people still think that there's something wrong with taking a drug that's going to alter your personality. So, but that's still the least controversial when it's used to fight a disease like that. And then above that is using chemical means for pleasure, to enhance pleasure in one's life. So drugs that activate the pleasure center a lot are drugs like cocaine and ecstasy, and those are significantly more controversial because they have a really high risk, because they activate the pleasure center of addiction and of abuse. So a lot of there have been studies with like rats and things where they have the pleasure center activated, and then that becomes all that they care about. So that's more controversial because a lot of people can get addicted to it, and to a lesser extent substances like alcohol and marijuana. But interestingly enough, in almost all societies across the world, they choose one of these drugs for pleasure and they deem that drug socially acceptable, and they use it in medication, in religious rituals, in recreational events. So for the United States, that drug would be alcohol. And it's interesting how usually a society, they'll choose their substance of choice and then they'll demonize all the others. They'll say you can't do any of these other substances, but this one is fine, this one isn't a drug. And I believe that's a form of ethnocentricity, and it's a form of believing that like your culture is right and that all other ways of doing things are wrong, and that we should fight against that. And then also the most controversial, more controversial than chemicals for pleasure, would be above survival and pleasure would be self-actualization and transcendence and enlightenment. And people who pursue well-being through chemical means would turn to drugs like LSD, mescaline, ayahuasca, hallucinogens, and things that have sort of spiritual significance to them. And they're significantly less physically harmful than drugs that activate the pleasure center. They have a much lower risk of addiction, but if they're abused, they can still cause significant psychological damage. So they can make you, if you abuse them, they can do significant damage psychologically. And a lot of religious people and spiritual people oppose this method of reaching enlightenment and spirituality through chemical means, because they feel that it cheapens the human soul and that it cheapens the idea of disciplined meditation and of, you know, a lifelong religious journey. And they feel like you can't just take these pills to reach enlightenment. It's sort of a synthetic enlightenment. So those are the three areas that I believe that people can use chemicals to enhance their life, and there are significant risks and benefits to choosing these methods. Obviously, it depends on which area you decide to, which area people are using the chemicals for. So someone who's suffering from clinical depression obviously isn't the same person who's trying to reach enlightenment through dropping acid, for example. So it depends on which area you're using the chemicals in, and you have to understand yourself, your own values, your own beliefs, and understand the risk, understand the benefits, and yeah, that's what I wrote my paper on. Thank you.